The Dan Dix Show.
All right, welcome to the program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dan Dix Show. I am your host, Dan Dix. Glad to be back on our third podcast here in, I think it's our second week of being under the regime of a new dictator here in Canada. Justin Trudeau has, for those of you who may not fully be aware, if you're not Canadian, there was a federal election here not too long ago, and we have been under the regime of Justin Trudeau now for a couple weeks. And I have to say, luckily, nothing too bad hasn't happened yet. The Gestapo hasn't kicked in my door. Nothing really terrible has really happened yet, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not to come down the road. Because as most of us know in this field, that there is a continuity to government. I mean, there is no difference essentially from the left to the right. We see that in America. In American politics, it's clear as day. But I think Canadians are starting to become aware of this themselves, because we're starting to see the patterns. These are patterns that people are beginning to recognize. And so joining us today for the Dan Dix Show, we're going to be speaking with David Whitehead. David started the Modern Knowledge Tour, or co-founded it. So Dave, man, thanks so much for joining us here on the Dan Dix Show.
Oh, honored to be here, Dan. Thanks a lot for thinking of me and having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on, because you're a Canadian and you're dealing with the same things that the rest of Canadians are right now, waking up to a new leader. What are your thoughts, first of all? Let's just get your thoughts a little bit on the Canadian election. I mean, Harper called this, not too long ago, and there was a liberal sweep, a liberal landslide getting a majority. Break it down for us. What are your thoughts on the results of this election and Justin Trudeau getting a majority?
Well, it's really early to say, like you were hinting at, but I think that when I hear sort of the pulse prior to the election, I felt that people in Canada were just desperately ready for change. We saw people saying things like, stop Harper, anything but Harper. And it was almost like there was an attitude in the air that any old politician will do at this point. Like, we just got to get rid of the Conservative government. We got to get Harper out. And if we can do that, we're inching towards more freedom and a sort of a better prospective future for everybody here in Canada. So right now, we're kind of hot on the heels of that, and he's making some big moves right off the bat. He's calling the airstrikes back from Syria. Mm-hmm. I personally think there's more reasons behind that than what the media is portraying it as. Mm-hmm. But then, and of course, he's talking openly about legalizing marijuana, which has been a long, hard fight here in Canada. Mm-hmm. So I feel in the way that it's similar to what happened in America with Obama. Mm-hmm. We brought this up in the last conversation we had, and it's a great example of where people, they're putting all of their faith in their elected leaders because they feel like it's the only way they can participate in their freedom. It's the only way they can actually get out and have a say, is if you hand in your vote ballot and we just get the right guy in and the right combination of officials that will represent us, and then everything's going to go back to normal. But the truth has never shown to be that in history. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we go all the way back to someone like Chrétien, at the end of his sort of political reign, everybody was dying to get him out. And then we had Paul Martin standing in, and then we had Harper come in, and he's just been changing the demographic here in Canada forever. And so people were like, okay, and every time they're fed up with the government in power, and they just can't wait for just any old person to get in to change things, and it never happens. And so my question is, why are we only given such few choices? Why? I mean, Trudeau is the son of a former prime minister of this country who was part of the deal of selling off the Bank of Canada and getting involved with international private central banks instead of having it represent the people. So we've got a very small selection of choices, and I wish people would see that and then put hope more into the grassroots types of movements than just hoping that, this politician, now it's Trudeau, he's a young guy, he's going to change everything.
Well, you make a great point on how people are often saying it's about the lesser of evils. Let's vote this guy out. We got to get this guy out. It's not so much about who the new guy is, it's about who the old guy was and about just trying to get that guy out of there. But this is a dangerous precedent, when you put that kind of hope and trust and faith into somebody just because you want to get the other guy out. The lesser of evil arguments doesn't work for me. You mentioned that Trudeau is doing some things that would appear to the general masses that he's making some of the right moves. Pulling out of the fight of ISIS sounds like a fantastic thing. Now, Harper was ready. People were weary of Harper's warmongering and marching into the Middle East. Do you think it's possible that under Trudeau, people will be more willing to go in there if he can convince people that it's for humanitarian purposes? I think it's possible that Trudeau's mission in the Middle East may be to turn the viewpoint of Canadians around to see that it's humanitarian and that we're not going in there for war, and perhaps the people will get behind it at that point because the young, new, fresh face is saying that we're doing this to help people.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's very important, and we really got to pay attention to what happens with this, because people maybe think that he's getting out of that line of business, let's just say, but he's really just changing the language. He's really bringing, I think his goal would be to bring Canada back to that feeling that we're just a peacekeeping country, we're there to help, we're there to give, medical aid or whatever. But I think that the reason he's pulling them out is because Russia has come in now, and they're really having just tremendous success and really made the US and NATO look bad by going in and just causing so much realistic elimination of that problem. So now they're like, well, let's not invest money there. Let's bring them back. The sentiment of the people will be like, yeah, we got this new leader, and now we're just back to peacekeeping ways again. But it, like you said, it does open the door for them to just push the same agenda in a different form, but just with different language.
Well, you mentioned too patterns that people don't seem to be able to recognize. We've seen in the United States, going from Bush to Clinton to Bush to Clinton. Two family dynasties controlling that country for a huge chunk of time. If we are similar to what the Americans are doing, somebody pointed this out to me the other day, and they said, well, Trudeau was once a former prime minister, that name. Mulroney was once a former prime minister. Could you ever foresee Mulroney's kid? What was his name? Ben Mulroney, I think his name was. He's on ET, right. He Talk Daily or whatever. If the United States can go back and forth between the Bushes and the Clintons, is it possible in Canada we could go back and forth between the Trudeaus and the Mulroneys?
Sure, it's possible. I mean, I think no matter who they do it with, we're still going back and forth with, two different gloves on the same hands. Like we've often talked, and I've heard you talk many times, Dan, about this idea that the two-party system really operates as an illusion. And I like when you look at the symbolism in America, we have, the eagle symbol, right? And for me, it's always represented the left wing, the right wing, but it's controlled by the same brain, the same bird. It's no different in virtually any country now. And now we see them making a huge push for more globalization and more of this global governance concept that when we first started talking about this, everybody's like, you're crazy. You guys are just a bunch of conspiracy theorists. But here they are announcing it on mainstream publications. We see them making the actions towards this. We got the EU now instead of sovereign little countries operating independently. So no matter what political leader they put in here in Canada, they will be there to support the agenda of the real owners of this country and the real power brokers and rich industrialists and centralized banks that are not have anything to do with Canada. They're just using us as like a 51st state of America. So we're going to mirror the American political system because we're really just an extension of it, I think.
Well, essentially, the agenda hasn't changed. I mean, under this global empire that's being built for centuries now, obviously, Canada is involved in this, and when the leaders change, the faces may change, but the game doesn't change.
Right.
So we're still involved in the global community. We're still very much so involved in the building of a new world order. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? I mean, all of this is leading towards global government. Some people may feel, well, what's so wrong with that? What's so wrong with the new world order? If things are bad, don't we want a new order? There seems to be confusion there. What would you say is the new world order?
Well, it's really just a corporate policy that's run by roundtable groups that run behind the scenes, and they've been proposing this for years. I mean, they tried to do it with the League of Nations, and then that got converted, of course, into the UN and the United Nations. And there's been a dream that's been alive amongst the elite levels, the elite families of the world, the banking interests, the corporate sectors, that has been to have a centralized totalitarian system, because they operate on a belief system. And this isn't me saying this, this is just me reading their own memoirs and their own writings and their own white papers, that they believe that there needs to be a superior class because humans are bad, humans are flawed, humans need to be controlled, regimented, documented, surveilled, and so we need to have an elite structure that knows the right answers for humanity. But what's also scary about that, even if you think that sounds good, is that those same people have a very interesting belief system in general, and they believe in a right to rule. They believe that they are almost separate from the human race. So we have almost like a breakaway society, a breakaway coterie of elite, very corrupt minds coming around to formulate that world government. So if that's the energy behind it, what's to stop another situation like we had with Adolf Hitler or Mao Zedong or any of these other examples in history that are just too countless to mention here? How is that kind of system not going to be able to get to, or how easy is it going to be for that kind of system or that group of people to get in power in a global system? I mean, it's an easy task to accomplish, and I think we have to be critical of what's happening to avoid that.
Well, in that regard, then, let's talk a little bit about what their beliefs are. I mean, we can't speak for the elite, but, after doing a number of years of research into who the major players are, and when you often follow the money, you follow it on up, you find who the key players are. You begin researching the key players, you begin looking into what they're into, what sort of things do they aspire to be, what works of literature do they study. You eventually learn that, and it's almost mind-boggling to say that a lot of these guys are into the occult.
Yeah.
I mean, these are spiritual individuals, and they obviously are aware that there's something else going on in this world because when you're involved and deeply steeped into the occult, as these people are, clearly you believe that there is something to this. We're coming up to the break pretty soon, but. I want to get into this more on the other side of the break about the let's call it the spirituality of the global elite and where their thoughts are. But I'm sure in your research you've also come across this concept of the elites dabbling in the occult. Yeah,
well, I mean, the word occult simply means hidden. That which has been occulted from view. So what they're studying is occulted, hidden knowledge, and the knowledge itself. People can debate whether it's good or bad, but I really look at it as just a tool. And if that tool's in the wrong hands, and there are a mass amount of people that aren't aware of it, then that's a differential of power. And so we have to really study what they think. What they believe.
Well, when you start to look into some of these things and you see that they go to Skull and Bones, you see that they go to Bohemian Grove, and for some of the viewer listeners who haven't heard of these things, these are ritualistic ceremonies that the elite engage in to gain power, to gain fame, to gain wealth, to gain favorship from their overlords who are pulling the strings. We're coming on to the break. Stay tuned, guys. We're going to be right back with David Whitehead right here on the Dan Dix Show. We'll be right back.
Captain Obvious takes listener questions today. Welcome, caller. What's your question?
I've been eating so much chlorella that my poop has turned green. What should I do?
It's simple. Drink beet juice to add red to your diet, and you can produce Christmas colors.
Wow, I never knew that.
Next caller, you're up with Captain Obvious.
Hello, Captain Obvious. I haven't been able to get the energy to vote since about 1996.
Oh, you have erectile dysfunction.
Well, I guess so. I keep trying to pull the lever, but nothing happens.
Well, you've probably got hanging Chad's disorder. Next time, vote with your feet.
Hello, I'm a gender-confused university student, and I don't know if I should use the women's restroom or the men's restroom.
That's easy. Reach down your pants and tell me what's there.
Shame?
Ah, yes, you're suffering from an overdose of political correctness. Your prescription is to listen to TalkNetwork.com.
All right, and we are back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dan Dix Show. I'm your host, Dan Dix, and we're here with our guest, David Whitehead. And Dave, right before the break, we were talking a little bit about the philosophies, the general thoughts and ideas of the oligarchy, of the elite. What kind of things are these guys into? Would you say that the upper echelon of the elite, could you consider them religious?
Well, yeah, they have a religious belief in very, very particular doctrines and ideologies. They clearly do that. But you can even see it by the symbolism that they wear and that they employ in all the levels of activity that they do. You can read it in their memoirs. You can hear it across the board. Even the type of ideas that they're discussing go back to ancient times. They go back to ancient Babylon, ancient Egypt, and throughout all of history, really. It's been, you look at something like Nazism and the rise of Nazism. It's a great example because they were also very steeped into the occult, and they were very interested in that because I think they saw that they needed to have a power differential against the masses of people in order to formulate this, in order to be successful with their goal. And nobody would be driven to do this for as long as they would be driven to do this, basically subjugating humanity. They wouldn't be driven to do it unless there was some kind of a religious fuel behind it. And when that kind of passion and that kind of belief that is actually something that's geared towards working against the best interests of humanity and for the best interests of them, well, that's a dangerous combination. And we keep seeing it acted out again and again. And you can even, if you understand symbolism and you've done any kind of research into the occult, you can see it littered all across the board in politics, in media. I mean, even looking at the music industry, for example, we see it expressed through there, through Hollywood. It's everywhere. And I don't believe it's all just bad or all just good. But it is there, and people are ignorant of it, and we do have to be worried about people that are talking about things like, reducing the world's population to a very specific number, regimenting the lives of everybody, controlling the lives of everybody as if they themselves are God, as if they themselves are the arbiters of truth and freedom. It's a twisted ideology in my view, and it's actually a misinterpretation of a lot of these ancient philosophical understandings. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, but I think that we'll see it played out on the global stage soon enough.
Well, I mean, it's clear to see that there is a darkness, if you will, when it comes to manipulating symbols to gain control over people. You mentioned the music industry, the film industry. Those are things that that pop culture is obviously just steeped in these things. Children these days are just glued to the television set, and the music that they're listening to now is absolute garbage. I sound like an old man now. Also, the crap they're listening to now is garbage.
Hippity hop.
Yeah. But I mean, when you watch this stuff, you just can't deny it. It's satanic. It's brainwashing children. It's just dumbing down society, and we see this in the music industry clear as day. Where else does this bleed into society? I mean, most people know that symbolism is used on television. Let's say when politicians are speaking to you, there's a reason to the colors of their ties or these sorts of things. Where else are these elites manipulating the consciousness of people through symbolism or their trickery there?
Well, I think it's permeated everywhere because we really look at, if you tie together the research of seeing centralization in all aspects of our modern civilization, really. You see it in the banking industry, you see it in the corporate industry, you see it in the political industry, you see it in the entertainment industry. Consolidation. So that means that for the media, for example, you have only like 5 or 6 big multinational corporations that run and control literally everything you see and hear, except for, of course, this show. But we're now seeing that is the same thing happening across the board. And so there's influence coming from everywhere. And when we look around and see the food, the air, the water, the information, so everything coming into our senses, we're being bombarded with things we don't understand. And what I've learned about symbolism is that it's something that is subconscious. It affects the subconscious mind of the individual. And anybody that's researched the works of people like Carl Jung and many other psychologists that were talking about this, there's sort of like a reservoir of these symbols in our phylogenetic memory. And we respond very particularly to certain symbols, to certain colors, to certain frequencies. So when you're watching like a Maybelline makeup commercial and you don't know why, you try to turn it off and whatever, but it still remains in your consciousness, and the next time you're in the store, you're going to go for it. It's because they were driving your primal urges, they were using the right colors, the way that woman moved her lips or whatever it is, and it's very, very subtle. And these guys on Madison Avenue and in organizations like the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, they've got the cookbook on human psychology. So here's the thing. They understand your psychology. Do we understand our own psychology? And I think that's where the solution also lies, is because if they have this advantage of knowing how to manipulate your drives and knowing how to push you and guide you into certain directions and to adopt certain belief systems that you wouldn't have otherwise adopted, well, then a solution would be to study your own psychology and to really start to know what symbolism is. Because symbolism can be used for a positive thing. Look at art. Look at music. It can uplift it can uplift humankind, and it can also suppress humankind. So this is something we really have to get in with.
Well, using technology as a double-edged sword, we know that the television is being used to brainwash and condition people. But we can use these things. I mean, if this show ever got on TV, that would be a good thing. We would be reaching millions of people with our message.
Right.
However, that message might be getting through flicker rates. A lot of people don't know that when you watch television, there is a flicker rate, and it does put you into a different state of mind. I've heard researchers say that for somebody who's never ever watched television, you go over to a tribe, a jungle in Africa or something, and you sit them down in front of a TV. The first time they watch it, it takes about anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes for them to get into that alpha wave state that makes you a little more susceptible to just taking in the information. But the second time they turn on that TV, it only takes about a half a second for you to immediately get into that state. So essentially, when you turn on the television, you're dumbed down the second that thing turns on, and you're just essentially like lulled in like a zombie. And then now we have, like you said, the elites using this to change people's ideas, thoughts, intentions, and a lot of these things come from they study who came before them, like Edward Bernays.
Right.
I mean, have you read Propaganda and how he showed how you can manipulate the consciousness of the masses? Do you think they use some of Bernays' techniques?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you're in a position of power and you want more power, you need to study people like Edward Bernays, and you need to understand the method of mass control and mass manipulation. Most people would deny the fact that they are led. They don't want to admit that. And I believe that we have the potential to live a life that is authentic and where we're not led, where we're actually led from our own spirit, our own mind, our own consciousness. But what tends to happen is we're so absorbed in the media constantly. I mean, you're sitting in front of the TV, then you're on your laptop, then you're on your phone, then you're walking out and a bus drives by, and then you're at the mall, and then you come home. Most of the information coming in has been perfectly designed for you, and millions of dollars went in to 30-second commercials to try to get you to buy a product or to buy an idea. And in case of politics, we just had the election. I mean, I've even watched some of these ad campaigns for these different politicians who are all bad-talking each other and competing or whatever, and you can tell their voices have been altered to sound more masculine and strong, and then the colors and what they're saying is so perfect that, I mean, the person that's not paying attention to this is just going to be like, oh yeah, finally they're talking about my rhythm. That sounds good. I'm going to vote for that person.
Right.
And they don't even know that it wasn't their real opinion. It wasn't their real reaction. It wasn't organic. It was actually manipulated there. So these are things that we have to become more aware of, because like I said, if they know and understand human psychology, and these firms and these ad companies have psychologists on staff who are studying inside and out the best way to get you to buy a product or an idea, maybe we should be doing that too. And I think that's really a good thing for us to start looking into. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite examples of that from the book, and I'll briefly tell the story that Bernays told. He says, suppose you want to sell a piano. He says, you could put out ads saying, our pianos are the best, Mozart uses them. But you're competing with other people who make automobiles, people who make this. He says, why do people choose music over the commodity of locomotion? Is it because they want that? No, it's because they have been led to believe that's what they want. He says, if you want to influence them in that way, what you do is you start convincing the people who build houses to create a little niche in the corner of the room for a piano. Then you stage an event. You invite famous people, and they have the piano in the corner of the room. Architects who admire those house builders will then do the same thing, and they will create a piano room in the corner of the living room. When the homeowner sees this, he will say to the seller, please sell me a piano. The propagandists have turned it around, where the purchaser used to say, the seller would say, please buy my piano. The propagandist has turned it around so that the purchaser is saying, please sell me a piano, thinking that the idea came to them themselves, when really it was implanted in there by the propagandists. So it's so trickery. I mean, it's so hard to see through this. How do we break through the brainwashing and let people know they're being lied to?
Well, definitely doing shows like this and talking about it and having a conversation, showing people that there are places to research. This is thoroughly documented. This isn't conjecture. This isn't just an opinion piece. This is thoroughly documented, and you can actually read it themselves. You can read what Bernays was talking about. And with the example of the piano, that might sound harmless enough, but then extrapolate that up to, us voting in a totalitarian system, a global system, or bringing some of these offshore banks into our country without even realizing why we agreed to do that in the first place. So, the thing, you can use that kind of technique to help open people's minds, or you can use it to close their minds. I think the only solution is to spread awareness about it, because it's kind of like if you're at a hypnotist show, and I've been at many of these. This is a very interesting thing to study, is you watch how the hypnotist doesn't just put one person under a particular hypnotism. It's a group of people on stage that they're able to, literally with the snap of their fingers, to put them in a particular hypnotic state where they're open to suggestion. These techniques have been around forever, and they've been there's now more access to people's minds. So if that hypnotist, and you watch the techniques, and you're sitting there as the audience member.
That is interesting. That's a very, very good point. We're coming up on the break. Guys, stay tuned. We're going to talk about this collective hypnotism after the break. Stay tuned.
If you currently have an IRA account or qualified plan, you can easily convert these funds into a precious metals IRA for safekeeping and peace of mind. A transfer or rollover is a penalty-free transaction and can provide for significant tax-deferred capital gains with low annual fees. For prudent investors seeking safety, flexibility, liquidity, and historic opportunity is waiting for you. And the professionals at IDP Consulting Group can assist you with your IRA needs by calling 855-860-6800 or visiting their website at idpconsultinggroup.com. A precious metals IRA allows you to fund your IRA with pure gold and silver that is securely held in a fully insured and segregated institutional account. If you have an existing IRA or qualified plan and want to learn more about this strategic alternative, call IDP Consulting Group at 855-860-6800. That's 855-860-6800 for a no-obligation consultation to discuss your personal needs today.
Welcome to the Health Minute. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, with my sidekick Tonto, not far behind. The topic today is, what about heavy metals in superfoods and nutritional supplements and even certified organic products that are coming from China? Well, you may not be aware of this yet, but the Talk Network online store, which you'll find at store.talknetwork.com, uses our own private laboratory, where I am the lab science director, and we test everything that we sell for toxic heavy metals, such as lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, and even elements with radioactive isotopes, such as uranium, strontium, and cesium. And if it doesn't show up as really, really clean, we reject it. And yes, we test this with university-level equipment, ICP-MS instrumentation, sensitive down to parts per billion concentrations. So if you want really clean foods, superfoods, and nutritional supplements that are laboratory validated, get them now at store.talknetwork.com.
All right, and we are back from the break, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dan Dix Show. I'm your host, Dan Dix, and once again, we are joined today in studio, actually, here with Dave Whitehead, and we've been talking about the manipulation of society through the propagandists. And just before the break, you made a really good point about showing how this can, an example in hypnotist sessions. I have never taken part in one of those things. I've never really liked the idea of somebody being able to have that much control over my mind. But yeah, just before the break, you were kind of explaining how that works. What's going on there in the room when he puts that many people under a spell, and how does that relate to what the propagandists are doing?
Well, it's about understanding triggers. If you know how to trigger people and you understand sort of a mass psychology, all right? Bernays talked about something called the public mind. Okay, so he wasn't referring to you as an individual. You as an individual can form and shape your mind in any way you wish. But as a collective, the minute you dive into that idea where you're part of the collective and you're not really an individual anymore, then you're more susceptible to sort of a mass propaganda technique. So the hypnotist is really doing the same thing. They understand cues, just like if you own a dog and you've seen people training dogs, they understand what generally works for dogs in general. And then there's sort of individualized techniques for certain groups or whatever. So the hypnotist understands general mass psychology. And that's why they tell you, 97% of the population is hypnotizable. So this will work on you. There's a few people that it won't work on. Well, the few people that it doesn't work on are people who are paying attention and they're keeping their mind active and they have a holistic brain alive and kicking and they are there perceiving and watching every move of that hypnotist. That person is in their center. That person who has the critical mind awake will not be able to be hypnotized. You literally have to kind of go along with it. And I did an experiment with myself where I went on stage at an event. It was just at a rodeo or something. And someone brought me on and I ended up allowing myself to be hypnotized because I wanted to see what it was like. And I ended up being there. And I had some control and some awareness of what was going on, but my inhibitions were completely gone. I followed the cues like as if it was a puppet on a string. And I was watching myself doing that, which was really interesting. And then afterwards, they gave me a final cue that said, when you wake up, you will go off stage and then come back up and you will shake the guy's hand and say a keyword or whatever. And sure enough, they snapped me out of it. I walked off stage, walked back on, shook his hand and said the keyword. And I knew I was doing it, but I still did it. And then another time I tried it and I said, no, I'm going to be critical. I'm going to be aware. And I'm not going to resist it, but I'm not going to just let myself go. I'm going to be a little bit more aware. And that time it didn't work. And I think that that's the difference. And I think that's going to be the difference in the whole global situation that we're in. And with the situation we're here in Canada is that we need to awaken the fire in the mind. We need to awaken the critical thought process and make sure we've got both hemispheres of the brain active when we're looking at this information. It can't just be a left brain logical only approach and it can't be purely intuitive. We need a balanced approach and therefore we'll shut down the hypnotist.
The hypnotized crowd is almost comparable to mob mentality. I mean, we've seen it countless times, like in Montebello, for instance. The elites know how to manipulate mob mentality because when you have a group of individuals at a protest, or here in Vancouver, not long ago with the hockey riots, when you break it down to the individual, a lot of these people are not interested in rioting or hurting anybody or doing anything violent, but something changes when the group gets together. And that's why I think it's important to maintain your individuality. I mean, the New World Order is all about bringing us together under this giant umbrella of being a singular one consciousness. And I think it's important to maintain our individuality because we've seen what they were able to do in, like I said, Blaze, with Montebello, where if you understand mob mentality, you can manipulate that and get the crowd to do exactly what you want. In that case, all it took was a provocateur to throw the first rock, and that got the crowd riled up enough to want to get involved, whereas these people wouldn't normally have done that. There's a collective. There's the idea of the collective consciousness, but then there's the idea of mob mentality. So it's like a tricky fine line between oneness, right? We want to work together. We want to network. We want to be one big happy family. That sounds great. Yet, what the elite are trying to achieve is almost controlling a singular global consciousness, would you say, as opposed to 7 billion individual ones?
Yeah, because they can't control 7 billion individuals.
Right.
There's no way they can get away with what they're getting away with if we had even a percentage of the population that was just activated as fully realized individuals that were capable of critical thinking. They wouldn't get away with it. Just that alone, that's your most powerful weapon in this fight. And even kind of looking at it from a martial art perspective, because that's kind of my basis, is we study physical forms of self-defense. But really, I've always looked at it allegorically as a way of learning how to protect your sovereignty, how to understand awareness, and how to not get driven into this mass mind type of idea. So, and to your point about coming together as one, well, we are from the same, we have the same stuff in us, and we have the same desires and goals. But the minute we all start trying to do just what the best is for the greater number and the greater good and all this kind of stuff, we give up our individual rights. And that's what happened to Canada. That's what's happening to these countries around the world, is that we're being told, give up your individual national sovereignty so that we can become one world. We're on the same team. We're going to wear the same one-piece silver suit, whatever. We're going to start exploring the galaxy. We need to come together, and that's the only way. But the problem is you're giving up your individual right by doing that. So, but if you had a bunch of empowered individuals getting together, now it's a different ballgame now, right? Kind of like a relationship.
Right.
If I have a relationship with my wife and only one of us is driving the boat, we're going around in circles.
Right.
But if we're both empowered individuals and we come together mutually to show love and come together on what we want to do, now both of us are rowing the boat and we're actually going somewhere. So it takes individuals to make up a true positive collective.
Fantastic analogy. That's absolutely right. And it's not only the concept of working together and to combat what they've been poisoning us with and all the propaganda. And let's not forget, folks, they not only poison us with information, but they poison us through our food. They poison us through our water. They poison us through the air. You're involved in martial arts. You are, you're a pretty in shape guy. You're physically fit. How important to you is it to maintain a healthy, balanced, healthy lifestyle in regards to what you intake into your body? Is that going to help people? Obviously, it's a good thing. How important is it, though, in relation to fighting the system?
It is absolutely critical, and thank you for bringing it up, because I look at it like this. How can you reach the mind of somebody that is, that mind is encased in a body that is full of toxicity and blockages, and the energy current isn't flowing properly, and the mind isn't fully activated because your cells aren't healthy, your immune system isn't healthy, your body's in an acidic environment. How can you communicate advanced information to unhealthy people? It's not possible. It's literally not possible. Their brain is going to prevent them from processing that information.
Right.
So if you want to know what you can do, start with you. Start with your body. Start with your mind. Start with your spirit isn't going to shine through fully, and you're not going to fully realize your potential unless you start moving those blockages that are getting in the way. So you need more brain power. You need to charge the batteries. So I always encourage people, get yourself on a physical level in good shape. Find an activity you enjoy. For me, it's martial arts. I like running. I like, now I'm in BC, so I like doing all this outdoor stuff that I've been doing. But for you, find something that's active and healthy, and then also start looking about where's your head at. Start monitoring your inner conversation. How are you talking to yourself on an individual level? How can you go out and wake other people up and inspire them if you yourself are stuck in a world of self-hatred, and I'm not good enough, and I'm too this, and I'm too tall, and that's what the system wants. That's why all the media is geared towards women have to look a certain way, men have to be a certain way. And that's how they're playing us like an orchestra. So to take back your sovereignty, you have to start building up that alkalinity in your body and working there. Then the other pieces will fall into place.
People often start feeling bad about themselves when they start ingesting garbage. Yeah. I mean, when you're not physically feeling well, you're not going to physically feel well about yourself. You're not going to be mentally well. And if you're physically sick, you're essentially going to be mentally sick. So right. I think the health aspect of fighting the New World Order, if you will, is incredibly, incredibly important. And folks, a great way to do this, and also to show your support for this show, is if you check out dandix.talknetwork.com, there you will find Mike Adams of naturalnews.com's store, where he has a fantastic line of products there. Everything from some of the whey protein, some of the stuff that I'm sure Dave is probably takes. I mean, vitamins and supplements are absolutely necessary, but the beautiful thing is, from Mike Adams Labs, they're some of the cleanest you can get on the market. So, folks, please check out dandix.talknetwork.com. Any products you purchase through that domain goes to support this show, and anything you purchase there will support myself and guys like Dave who are trying to bring this information out there. So please check out the links at dandix.talknetwork.com. All right, Dave, we're coming up on to the final segment here, and, it's you can talk all day about some of the problems of the global elite and some of the things that are going on. It can get pretty depressing. It can get it's a downer what's going on. I mean, we're being completely controlled. But as we lead into the next segment, I want to start thinking about what are some of these solutions. Obviously, getting healthy, getting physically fit, getting your mind back on track is a fantastic thing you can do. But where do we go from there? I mean, once we have a physical, healthy body, What's the next step? I'm sure it's different from every individual, but how did you kick it off?
Well, I got myself to that point, and then I asked, how can I contribute now? Because I felt like I'm ready. I've researched a lot. I feel very motivated. So I needed to find an outlet. And that's when I started my show. That's when I started doing the work just like what you're doing now. And I think the more people that are activated and the more people that are finding their passion again and finding their energy, they're going to start contributing in the way that's best for them. And everybody listening right now, you know what I'm talking about. You came to this planet for a reason. You know what that is. And if you don't know what that is, whatever that is you're here to contribute, that's where you need to focus your attention, is find out what that is and then start doing it.
Well, the thing is that this is happening. I mean, most people can look around the world. You just look at the mainstream media, you watch the news, and you see, most people can sense that something is going on. Yeah, something is not right. And I actually think that when history looks back at this moment in time, who knows, maybe 100 years from now, the people in our time period, in our generation, are going to be looked at some of the people who had to decide what side of this New World Order system are we going to be on? Are we going to be on the side of truth, freedom, trying to bring the message of truth and liberty to humanity, or are we going to fall into the system and be sucked into and just perpetuate what they're doing? Because society can essentially almost be broken down into, some people might say you're either of God or the devil. Some people might break it down to black and white, but essentially we're in this, and we're about to go to the break. So leading into the next segment, I just want to continue on that thought about where are we going from here, and where does society need to go from here? Because there seems to be a bit of a misconnect there. So again, we're about to come out on the break. Once again, our guest is David Whitehead. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back here very soon, right after the break, right here on the Dan Dix Show. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Health Minute with the Health Ranger. One of the ways the system controls you and keeps you down is by literally poisoning your brain with toxic heavy metals like lead. Believe it or not, a lot of the supplements and vitamins that are sold out there are actually made by pharmaceutical companies using cheap ingredients that are contaminated with lead. And lead decreases your IQ. The more you eat, the more dumbed down you become, and that's what the system wants. But if you want to explore your maximum potential as a creative, divine, unique individual, you need to keep your mind free of toxic heavy metals like lead. And that's my specialty. I run a lab where we test all the supplements and superfoods that we offer for all the heavy metals, including lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium. And that's why everything that we offer at the Talk Network store is laboratory validated for cleanliness and purity. Protect your brain by feeding it right at store.talknetwork.com.
All right, and we are back. This is the Dan Dix Show. I'm your host, Dan Dix, and we are joined here with our guest, David Whitehead. And just before the break, we were talking a little bit about how people are conditioned and how people are, there's some sort of a divide, and that's where we come in, where we need to get this information out to people so that they can arm themselves with solutions. And that's what I kind of want to touch on in this final segment is the solutions, working towards how we can show people what they need to do. The people who get that they're being manipulated, the people who realize, okay, the mainstream media is lying to me, the education system has messed up my mind, the poison in the food is messing with my body. I want to get involved, I want to do it. You're somebody who did that. You jumped in head first. And this isn't just, like we said, a physical battle, but we are indeed involved in a spiritual warfare. I essentially chalk the whole thing up to spiritual warfare. I mean, would you say, we're getting into some deeper stuff here, but would you say there's a bigger picture going on than what you can see here with our eyes and hear with our ears?
Absolutely. I'm kind of thinking of a quote that came from the founder of Aikido. His name is Morihei Ueshiba, and he used to say very famously, your spirit is your true shield. A lot of people in martial arts have been training so long to get that physical element down, and that's a very key thing that you need to do. You need to train and learn how you can defend yourself and express the human body, and work with that kind of energy. But really what I think you're doing is you're creating a healthy sort of spiritual immune system. Just like what you would do with your body. In order to have a healthy physical immune system, so you're not getting sick all the time, then you need to strengthen your immune system. Seems pretty straightforward. The same would happen with psychological immunity, right? You need to strengthen your psychological immunity by what we were talking before, being aware of the pullers of the strings, being aware of the hypnotic techniques that are being used against you. That's all going to lead you to where your energy at. Some people use the word spirit, some like energy. Whatever word you prefer for that realm of things, there's definitely, even in the scientific world, research that shows that obviously what we see is not all that exists. In fact, it's a fraction of all that exists. We see really a very, very tiny fraction of what we might call reality. And even right now, we're broadcasting over the internet. We have internet. How's that possible? There's other things going on, but I think even beyond that, there's even more. So by doing these things in the physical world to help yourself become more immune to these external forces, the same thing's going to happen as a process spiritually, where you're kind of, that old idea of putting your spiritual armor on, where you're protecting every aspect of your being on all dimensional levels. And you have to have a balance between the mind, the body, and the spirit. I think that's why I was really drawn to martial arts, because that was the first thing I read when I picked up a book. And there was a sensei who was describing that process of synergizing the mind, the body, and spirit, so they're all active, they are aware, they are immune, they are healthy, they are vibrant. That's how you create an empowered individual. And anytime an individual like that rises up and they get into a position of influence in the world, you see them chopped down instantly. And so what has to happen is more people have to rise up like that, because they can't chop down everybody. They can only target individuals, lone wolves. So that's where we have to get to, is this understanding of what we might call spiritual warfare, and how we can protect ourselves on that realm.
Yeah, because I mean that's really what the big picture is in my mind. I mean, there are the things that we have on this world, and then there are the things that we're going to have to deal with after this world. So I mean that's essentially what it all comes down to. But you point out, and rightfully so, and maybe the martial arts helped you understand this, that it's a spiritual thing, it's a physical thing, it's a mental thing. And then when you have the elites kind of convincing people that, for example, getting vaccinations is something that you absolutely have to do. What are your views on the pharmaceutical industry, the doctors pumping people full of vaccinations and other things that are essentially breaking us down?
Yeah, it's such an important topic. We could probably do many shows on this. Now as a father, I'm a father of two beautiful young girls. That's really brought things into perspective for me. And it's a whole different ballgame when it's not just talking about you and what's best for you, but now I have to think about what's best for them. Yeah. And if there's any debate out there that is polarizing the most, I would say right now it is the vaccine question, amongst parents especially. And everybody has their view on it. And there's a battle taking place, a battle of information taking place in that arena. And it is important because we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be human? What does it really mean to be an organic human living an organic, fulfilled existence? If we're going to give our bodies and the rights to our bodies away to these pharmaceutical companies who have a horrible track record, who are funded by billions of dollars. They have the biggest lobby group in America, pretty much. Like, they outnumber Congress 5-1 or something ridiculous, or more than that. And so they have a lot of power and influence over the decisions the government makes as to what you're allowed to put in your body and what you're not allowed to put in your body, and what you should put in your body and what you shouldn't, how we're going to combat disease. And so we have a huge uprising of people that are saying, you know what, I don't trust what the government's doing with that. I don't trust these big pharmaceutical companies. I don't want them forcibly pumping these chemicals and toxins into my kids' bodies. I don't know what's in there, and we see a ton of these negative reactions and side effects going on. I'm not just going to hand my baby over to you. And so what's happening is they're now researching other alternative ways of how to build a healthy immune system and combat disease, which is amazing. So, keeping your body intact without giving the sovereignty of your own body away to some corporation who is also toying around with the idea of injecting nanotechnology into these shots. I mean, come on. We've watched Star Trek with the Borg. We've watched The Matrix. We've watched Terminator. We know that this has been coming for a while. So these types of things are leading into bigger questions, and we really have to answer them.
Well, we started off this show talking a little bit about Justin Trudeau, and now obviously he's pushing for the legalization of cannabis, and we are learning a lot more now about what that plant can do to you medicinally when you ingest it. So, just in closing, I want to talk a little bit about Trudeau's legalization plans and what this might mean for consumers of cannabis in Canada. And just what are your thoughts in general on Trudeau's plan to try to legalize cannabis? As you said, we should have the right to put in our body what we feel we want to, and I think it's pretty... it's a fact. It's been proven that marijuana has never killed anybody. So what's your thoughts on Justin Trudeau's plans for legalization and what it might spell for consumers of cannabis in Canada?
Well, I mean, I think that idealistically, it's a good thing that finally we're not legally held liable for our own natural choice to put whatever we want in our body anyways. But I'm worried about what the direction they're going to take. I'm very suspicious of government naturally, especially when you research the kind of stuff we do. And so when I see them proposing this, I see them more as, we want to get a piece of that action. We want a piece of that business. So they're not doing this because they care about your rights. They're not doing this because they care about helping people with the types of illnesses and ailments that cannabis does treat. They're interested in money. They're interested in control. And so they want to turn this into the tobacco industry or the alcohol industry. And some people would say, well, that's better than what we have. Sure, it's better than what we have. That's why they're giving it to us. They know how to play this game. They can't take it away from you completely. They need to give you just enough illusion that you've got some control, but realistically they're running it behind the scenes and they're controlling it. So I'm concerned about, and second of all, we don't even know what he's going to do. It's not really clear at this point. Like, he could change his mind. He could be writing this in the background with his group. This might not even be something he cares about. This could be handed to him on the teleprompter. And who knows? So I think we have to be very suspicious and very cautious moving forward with this.
I would have to agree 100%. I mean, we just simply can't trust. When you become Prime Minister of Canada, at this stage in the game, you don't get there by accident. I mean, you were groomed and made to be put in that position. So we simply can't trust the government to come in here and say, oh, you want marijuana legalized? We're going to do it how you want it to be done. No, they've had it illegal for the last 93 years for a very specific reason. If they see it's time to cash in on that cash cow, that's essentially, I think, as well, what we're seeing in this country is Marijuana Inc. essentially coming in and trying to shut down the mom and pops. So, we're going to have to see where Justin Trudeau takes this, and I think it's going to be very interesting for the future of Canada, the future of Canadians. This is going to be a talking point. This is going to be an issue that I think is going to be all over the place in 2016, not just for Canada, but this could be this could trigger something globally. We here at Press for Truth have been saying for a while now that the cannabis is the gateway to liberty. If this is done in the right way, people can see just how bad the tyranny has gotten when they realize that we're being prosecuted for a plant, essentially. So on that note, let's tell the people a little bit about before we close it out. You've got your own Modern Knowledge tour. You've got a lot of great speakers. Get some of the plugs out before the end of the show. Tell the people where they can go and some of the people you're expecting or you have lined up for your upcoming shows.
Well, we're very excited. My partner, Chris Rusak, he's been working really hard behind the scenes. He's putting all the work into this one because it's happening in Toronto. And I really want people in Toronto and around the area to go and support this event. We can't keep doing this without your help and without your support. And this is going to be vital information. It's called Earth Rhythm. The event is on November 28th. All the information's at modernknowledge.ca. We've got Les Stroud, Survivor Man. We've got Dr. Robert Schock, he's a world-famous geologist. We've got some other speakers that are kind of slipping my mind. I apologize.
What do you think Les Stroud is? I'm kind of curious. What would Survivor Man be talking about on the Modern Knowledge Tour?
Well, I'm really curious actually to hear what his full thing is. But what we really resonated with was this is a guy that's actually gone out there. He knows a lot about what's happening in sort of the ecological world, and
he's certainly self-sufficient and sustainable on his own.
And that's the theme. We're also having the gentleman's name is slipping my mind. I'm horrible for plugging this, but it's the guy that's building Earthships, and he's demonstrating that you can build a self-sufficient home off the grid completely using the energy of the sun, and you can literally, for those that want to get off the grid and kind of build their home in that way, there are really groundbreaking, even very modern, up-to-date ways of doing it. So combined with that, I'm sure Les is going to give his opinion on how to really understand what it is to be self-sufficient, how we can connect to the earth in a positive way and work symbiotically with the planet as opposed to everything that we've set up working against it. So this is going to be really important. There's going to be music. There's going to be an after party. There's going to be a lot of awesome people there. And I think that anytime you can bring energy into a room of like-minded people, all of them, of course, their own unique individuals, but they're all expressing their take and talking about solutions, that's a magical thing. I've seen it happen many times with our events, and I definitely think Toronto's going to be an exceptional event to check out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's amazing that we've come to this point, and you've got people like Les Stroud. That's fantastic. Guys who are coming out there to show you that when you become more self-sustainable, when you become more sufficient, I think the message maybe is that is the enemy of the state. Yeah. That is what the government fears. Is individuals who are self-sufficient, self-sustainable, able to live their own lives free of the nanny state, not having to answer to nobody. So on that note, once again, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Dan Dix Show. I want to thank you once again for tuning in. Be sure to join us right here at the same time next week. And that's all for today. I want to thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you right back here on TalkNetwork.com next Monday.
Be sure to check out dandix.talknetwork.com.